Welcome to today's deep dive. I am so excited for this one, honestly.
You too? We have some really fascinating stuff to cover today.
We really do. So we're unpacking some source material from notes and concepts for episode 2 of the Pilot Parent podcast.
Right, the episode they call the co-regulation cockpit.
Exactly. And the whole mission today is to look at those incredibly stressful moments when a child is just having a full emotional meltdown.
Those moments that test every single ounce of your patience.
Oh, completely. We're going to unpack this profound and honestly very difficult shift from demanding a screaming child to just calm down
Yeah.
to simply conveying the message, I am here.
It's a huge shift. And the biological mechanics behind it, this idea of co-regulation, is just wild.
It really is. But to set the scene for you listening, I want you to imagine a pretty terrifying scenario. You are on a commercial airplane, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You're cruising at 30,000 feet, maybe reading a book, sipping a ginger ale, and suddenly the floor just drops out from under you.
Oh no, like a massive loss of altitude.
Yes, a stomach-churning drop. The cabin shakes violently. The yellow oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, dangling right over your head.
That is terrifying.
Right. And blaring, high-pitched alarms start sounding from the front of the plane. And then the cockpit door bursts open.
This sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It gets worse, because the pilot runs out into the aisle, waving their arms, completely panicked and just screaming at the top of their lungs along with the alarms.
Wow, yeah, if I'm a passenger watching that happen, my brain completely gives up.
Exactly. If the person flying the plane is panicking, with absolute certainty that you are unprotected, your sense of safety suffers a total structural collapse.
It's such a deeply visceral image. You're trapped in this metal tube, and the one individual whose entire job is to keep you safe has lost control. The panic would be instantaneous.
And yet, when a toddler or a young child has a complete emotional meltdown in the middle of our living room, our very first instinct as adults is often to become that panicked pilot.
It's true. We start shouting over the alarms to try and fix the problem.
We really do. But before we get into the mechanics of how to actually calm a child down, we have to look at the physical toll this takes on the caregiver.
Because it is genuinely exhausting.
It is. The source material spends significant time on this exhaustion. They call it the mirror explosion because, it feels physically painful to be in a room with a screaming kid.
Oh, absolutely.
My jaw clenches, my chest gets tight, and I feel this immediate spike of rage.
Right. To understand why a screaming toddler makes you feel like you are literally losing your mind, we have to look at the biology driving that reaction.
Science behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It centers around a network in your brain called mirror neurons. Basically, human beings are evolutionarily wired to catch or mirror the emotions of the people around us.
So it's not just me being a bad, impatient parent.
Not at all. It is not a character flaw.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental survival tool.
Wait, is this the same neurological mechanism that makes me yawn when I see someone else yawn across the room?
It's the exact same system, just operating on a much, much higher life or death frequency.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Think about early human history, right? Out on the prehistoric savanna.
Right.
If you're sitting with your tribe and the person next to you suddenly looks utterly terrified and starts sprinting away, your brain does not have the luxury of time.
Right. You can't just casually look around and be like, I wonder what they're running from.
Exactly. You cannot sit there, logically assess the landscape, scan the tall grass for a predator, and then make a calculated decision about running.
Because by the time you've done the math, you've been eaten by a lion.
Yes. So your mirror neurons bypass all of that slow logical processing. They instantly replicate that feeling of raw terror in your own nervous system.
Wow.
They flood your body with adrenaline so your legs start moving before you even know what you're running from. Emotional mirroring literally keeps you alive.
Okay, so let's translate that prehistoric mechanism to a modern living room. A 3-year-old completely loses their mind because, I gave them the blue cup instead of the red cup.
A classic trigger.
Right. The child is experiencing genuine world-ending distress over this cup. My ear catches the decibel level of that scream, and my brain doesn't just say, oh, little Timmy is frustrated about plastic drinkware.
No, not at all. Your brain registers the intense distress of a member of your tribe, and it immediately pulls the fire alarm.
Kid thinks there's a lion.
Exactly. Your sympathetic nervous system, which is essentially the body's gas pedal for emergencies, slams down to the floor. Your heart rate skyrockets.
Yeah.
Cortisol and adrenaline just dump into your bloodstream.
So my biology is reacting as if that prehistoric lion just walked into the kitchen.
You nailed it.
As someone who has definitely lost their temper during a meltdown and felt incredibly guilty about it later, I think this is a massive relief for you listening.
It's hugely
It
validating.
really is. The source material is essentially validating that my biological hardware is working perfectly. When I lose my cool, it's not because I'm a terrible person. It's because my body is treating a frustrated toddler like an apex predator.
You are fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming. That programming is screaming at you to react to the noise and neutralize the threat.
The mere explosion.
Right, the child's immature nervous system is exploding, and your mirror neurons are causing your mature nervous system to detonate right alongside it.
But we aren't cavemen running from lions anymore. We are adults trying to get a kid to pin their shoes on.
Exactly. The context has changed.
So if our biology is actively working against us in these moments, how do we override it? I mean, we can't just tell our brain, hey, it's just a shoe, turn off the adrenaline.
You can't. The source material argues that overriding this instinct requires a fundamental shift in how you view your role in the room.
Okay, what kind of shift?
You have to change the instrument you use to measure the environment. It's the difference between operating as a thermometer versus operating as a thermostat.
Oh, that analogy stood out immediately in the notes. Let's dig into the physics of that.
Let's do it.
So a thermometer is entirely passive. It just hangs on the wall and reflects the ambient heat. If the room heats up to 100 degrees, the mercury inside the thermometer rises to 100 degrees.
Oh, wait.
So in parenting, being a thermometer means the child gets to 100 degrees of anger, and the parent instantly matches them at 100 degrees of frustration.
The child starts yelling, so you raise your voice to be heard over them.
Right.
The child gets physically aggressive, so your posture becomes rigid and imposing. You match their temperature. You let the environment dictate your internal state.
But a pilot parent, according to the source, must function as a thermostat.
Because a thermostat doesn't just read the room. It actively sets the temperature.
Exactly.
A thermostat senses that the room has hit 100 degrees, and it kicks on the air conditioning to regulate the environment back down to a baseline of, say, 68 degrees.
So if you, the caregiver, can maintain your own calm, cool baseline, what happens?
The child's developing brain will eventually catch that calm. Their mirror neurons will sync up with your regulated temperature. This is the biological essence of co-regulation.
You are literally lending them your mature nervous system because theirs is currently offline.
That's a great way to put it.
I'm picturing two tuning forks, right? If you strike one, it vibrates with chaotic energy. If you hold it next to a silent tuning fork, the silent one will start vibrating too.
Unless you firmly clamp your hand around one of them to force it still.
Exactly. You have to actively absorb and dampen the chaos. But holding that baseline temperature sounds exhausting. Think about how much electricity an AC unit uses to cool down a boiling room.
It requires an immense amount of intentional energy, which is why the source connects this back to aviation with the oxygen mask rule.
Right. Flight attendants always instruct you to secure your own mask before assisting others, including your kids.
Because if you pass out from hypoxia, you are entirely useless to the kid sitting next to you.
Applied to emotional regulation, this represents a broader philosophy the source labels Authoritative 2.0.
It is the humbling realization that in any conflict with a child, the very first person you must regulate is yourself.
You cannot pour from an empty cup.
And you cannot pull someone else out of a fire if you are currently engulfed in flames. You cannot calm a storm if you are the storm.
Wow. You cannot calm a storm if you are the storm. That is going to stick with me. It's conceptually brilliant, but let's talk about the messy reality of actually doing this.
Okay, let's get into the practical side.
Because sitting here in a quiet room, being a thermostat sounds great, but let's say I'm in the middle of a grocery store. My kid is throwing a massive flailing tantrum in aisle 4 because I said we aren't buying a specific box of sugary cereal.
A very real, very stressful scenario.
People are staring. My internal temperature is rising. What is the actual procedure here?
Well, the source provides a very specific practical masterclass for that exact moment. They call it the 3-step landing.
Okay, lay it on me.
And the very first step is often the hardest one for adults to execute. Step 1 is the silent anchor. You must stop talking.
Wait, stop talking. My immediate instinct in aisle 4 is to negotiate. I want to lean down and say, look, we have cereal at home. If you stop crying right now, we can watch a show when we get back. Why is the source telling me to be quiet?
Because the child literally cannot hear your logic. During a severe emotional meltdown, a child experiences what neurologists call an amygdala hijack.
An amygdala hijack.
Yeah. The amygdala is the brain's primitive alarm system, and it has completely taken over. When that happens, the prefrontal cortex, the evolved part of the brain responsible for reasoning, language, and impulse control, goes entirely offline.
Oh, wow. So the logic center is literally shut down to divert power to the alarm system.
Exactly. To a brain in that hijacked state, your well-reasoned arguments about the cereal you have at home are just extrasensory noise.
That makes so much sense.
It's like trying to teach a calculus lesson in the middle of a hurricane. Adding more words just overwhelms an already overloaded system.
So what do I do instead of talking?
The source advises you to drop the verbal negotiations. Move physically closer, get down below their eye level, and use your physical presence as the anchor. Ground the room with your body, not your vocabulary.
Okay, let me push back on the mechanics of that just a little. What if they aren't just crying? What if they're throwing the boxes of cereal or, trying to hit me?
Right, safety is the priority.
I can't just sit cross-legged on the linoleum floor being a silent anchor while taking a beating.
A vital distinction needs to be made here regarding physical boundaries. Being a silent anchor does not mean being a punching bag.
Good to know.
If the child is hitting, you use the absolute minimum amount of words necessary, something like, "I will not let you hit me," while gently but firmly blocking their hands or holding their arms.
Okay, so you intervene to keep everyone safe, but you still refuse to engage in a debate about the cereal.
Precisely. You maintain the calm, heavy physical presence. You keep your hands steady on the yoke of the airplane.
So I've secured the physical space. I'm anchored. That brings us to step 2 of the landing. Validate the emotion, not the behavior.
This requires threading a very delicate needle.
It sounds hard.
The objective is to acknowledge the sheer magnitude of the child's pain without endorsing their actions or giving in to their demands. The source text suggests a specific script for this.
What's the script?
It's simple. I see you're having a really big moment. It's okay to be sad. I am right here.
I am right here. We are replacing calm down with I am right here. That requires so much restraint.
It really does.
As parents, we hate seeing our kids in pain. It feels unnatural to just watch them suffer over something as trivial as cereal without trying to instantly fix it.
But you have to remember you are connecting with their humanity while holding the boundary. You aren't saying, "Okay, fine, put the cereal in the cart, just please stop making a scene."
Right. You are communicating, I see that you are devastated about this cereal. That devastation is real to you, and I am capable of sitting right here with you while you feel it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It brings us to the third step of the landing, and honestly, the concept that fascinated me the most in these notes.
Oh, step 3, the re-entry gap.
Yes, you are anchored on the floor, you've validated their sadness, and now the instructions simply say to wait.
Just wait.
Specifically, wait for the sigh.
Yes. The re-entry gap. I want to zoom in on that specific physical cue because it's brilliant. The notes describe it as a sudden drop in the shoulders or a deep, shuddering breath after a long bout of crying.
It's a physiological shift.
What is mechanically happening in a child's body when they do that sigh?
That sigh is literally the sound of the brain shifting gears.
Yeah.
Earlier, we talked about the sympathetic nervous system, right? The gas pedal.
Right.
The sigh is the biological signal that the parasympathetic nervous system, the brake pedal, is finally coming back online.
Wow.
The storm of cortisol is breaking. The amygdala is releasing its grip on the brain. That deep breath means the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is rebooting and stepping back into the cockpit.
So the child is re-entering a neurological state where logic and language are actually possible again.
Exactly.
So for anyone listening who has ever tried to lecture a crying child, this is the golden rule. Do not try to reason with them. Do not explain why we don't throw things in the store until you see the sigh.
If you try to teach the lesson before the sigh, you are talking to the storm, not the pilot.
That's a great metaphor.
If you jump in with a lecture too early, you risk re-stimulating the amygdala and reigniting the fight-or-flight response.
You just restart the whole tantrum.
Right. The re-entry gap requires the patience to let the biology fully run its course. You have to wait for the neurological shift to complete itself before you put your parent hat back on and say, "Okay, let's talk about what just happened."
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here because I know exactly what some of you are thinking as you listen to this.
Let's hear it.
You're picturing yourself sitting on the floor of the grocery store, looking at your kid who just threw a fit over cereal and saying, I see you are having a big moment. It's okay to be sad. Doesn't that just reinforce the tantrum? Doesn't that teach them that screaming gets them validation and attention? Isn't this just permissive parenting where the kid rules the house?
It is the most common and perhaps the most important critique of this method. And the source material addresses this head-on by exploring what they call the gentle parenting trap.
The gentle parenting trap.
Yeah. There is a widespread fundamental misunderstanding of what gentle parenting actually means. People often conflate being gentle with ensuring the child is never upset.
Mm. They think success means their kid is always happy and accommodating.
And that expectation is a trap that leads directly to permissive parenting. If your goal is to prevent your child from ever experiencing distress, you end up having no boundaries.
Which is exhausting for the parent.
Exhausting for the parent, and ironically, it creates highly anxious children. Kids need to know where the walls are. They need to know the pilot is capable of flying the plane.
Right. If the pilot turns the yoke over to the passengers every time someone cries, the entire cabin feels unsafe.
The panic in the cockpit returns. If the toddler realizes they are flying the plane, it's terrifying for them.
That makes total sense.
The source makes a crucial distinction. The true pilot-parent mindset authoritative 2.0 does not avoid turbulence. They fly straight through it. A pilot doesn't divert the flight to a different city just because they hit a patch of bumpy air.
They hold the course.
Exactly.
So back in aisle 4, the boundary remains absolute. No, we are not buying the cereal. You do not waver, you do not cave.
All right.
But you provide a safe, regulated cockpit for the child to express their absolute fury about that boundary.
You are uncoupling the boundary from the emotional reaction to the boundary. You enforce the rule about the cereal, but you do not punish the child for having big feelings about that rule.
The source uses a brilliant phrase for this, and I want to highlight it for you because it encapsulates the whole philosophy. We are firm on the flight plan, but kind to the passengers.
The flight plan is non-negotiable. You are the adult. You set the destination. But you can still have empathy for how uncomfortable the turbulence is for the people sitting in the back of the plane.
It changes the entire dynamic of discipline. You are no longer fighting your child. You are holding a boundary. Your child is fighting the boundary, and you are simply keeping them safe company while they exhaust themselves against it.
And that subtle reframing is the secret to acting as the thermostat.
Because it's not personal anymore.
Right. When you genuinely realize that their anger is not a personal attack, and it's not a threat to your authority, it's just a messy neurological reaction to a perfectly reasonable boundary. Your mirror neurons don't have to explode.
You don't have to hit your own gas pedal. You can just watch the storm happen from the safety of the pilot's seat.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder how much of this applies beyond just toddlers, you know? Understanding co-regulation feels like a cheat code for dealing with dysregulated adults, too.
Oh, co-regulation is effective on nervous systems of all ages. Humans never outgrow the need for a calm anchor when they are dysregulated.
It's a deep dive for another day, maybe.
Definitely. But bringing it specifically back to raising children, the source text leaves us with one final, incredibly powerful analogy. They pivot away from aviation and look at the ocean.
Right, I remember this.
The notes state, you cannot teach a child to swim while they are drowning.
Drowning in cortisol. Drowning in their own adrenaline.
Exactly. When they are caught in the rip current of an amygdala hijack, your only job is to act as the lifeguard. You keep them safe, and you pull them to the shore.
And the teaching comes later.
Yes. The teaching, the discipline, the moral of the story, the lecture on why we don't throw boxes in the grocery store, all of that crucial parenting work happens on the beach.
Yeah.
It cannot happen in the waves.
But think about how often we try to do exactly that. We try to shout swimming lessons over the sound of crashing waves.
It's so counterproductive.
The kid is melting down, completely unable to process language, and we are standing over them delivering a TED Talk on public etiquette and nutrition. They are drowning, and we are literally handing them a textbook on water safety.
It is a deeply ingrained reflex because we want the uncomfortable situation to end immediately.
Of course we do.
But the neuroscience proves that rushing the lecture is utterly ineffective. By focusing simply on the rescue, using the silent anchor, validating the emotion, and respecting the re-entry gap until you hear that sigh, you save a tremendous amount of your own energy.
And you actually get through to them.
More importantly, yes, you build a foundation of deep neurological trust.
Because when you finally get them to the beach and their thinking brain comes back online, they actually trust the pilot who safely navigated them through the storm. They are regulated, and they are finally ready to listen to the flight plan.
Discipline is profoundly more effective when it is delivered in a state of mutual regulated calm.
This entire deep dive really reconfigures how you look at the chaos of family life.
It really does.
Moving from the guilt of the mirror explosion to the empowerment of being the thermostat and having an actual biological roadmap with the three-step landing, it is not about eliminating turbulence. It's about knowing exactly how to handle the controls when the alarms start blaring.
It reinforces that your own internal calm is the single most powerful tool in your parenting arsenal.
Well said. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over based on all this incredible source material.
Yeah, let's give them some homework.
We've talked extensively about the child's triggers, how their brain shuts down, and how to wait for their parasympathetic sigh. But turn that lens inward for a moment.
Okay.
Think about your own biology. The next time the metaphorical oxygen masks drop in your house and your internal temperature starts rapidly rising toward 100 degrees, what is your personal internal thermostat reset button?
Oh, that's a great question.
What is the one specific tangible thing you can do? Whether it's taking a deep breath, repeating a grounding mantra, or physically taking one step back from the chaos that you can press before you engage with your child.
Because if the ultimate goal is for them to catch your calm, you have to figure out how to generate it first.
Exactly. Identifying that personal reset button is the first step of Authoritative 2.0. Figure out what that button is for you, strap in, and trust your instruments. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the co-regulation cockpit. We'll catch you on the next one.